Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to the subscribers to this podcast. First and foremost, this podcast, let me say it that way. First and foremost, those that have been listening on audio or new to the audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all that good stuff. Appreciate you. Welcome if you're new. But because the initiative, as of maybe 2023, right? The 50th year of hip hop, building the YouTube channel went from somewhere around 100, 200, then stayed at 280 subscribers at one point, set a goal to hit 500, hit that, set a goal to hit 1,000, hit that within the same year, and then set a goal for 5,000 for this year. And guess what? We've already hit it. So shout out to you, whether you've been here, whether you're new again, whether you like the weekly podcast, you like the shorts I post. Big shout out to the people whose post I share, right? Because that's what it's really about. I find dope things, hip hop related, funny things, quirky things, battle rap, whatever. And I share it as a short, so stay locked into that. Shout out to you if that's what you like. But there's more content on the way, and something in particular that should be dropping very soon, and maybe dropping sort of, kind of around the time of this episode. If you're from the future, you already know, man. Come on, we 20 episodes in, man. Get your ass out of here. You know what I'm saying? Spoiling everything. But no. So recently, Smith & Wesson put out their latest album entitled Infinity. I reviewed it on a prior episode of Hip Hop Now podcast. You can check that out if you want to know what I thought. But it got me to thinking, and one thing I said in the podcast was like, maybe I should do a tier list of Smith & Wesson's catalog, because truth be told, I heard some albums and there were other albums I didn't hear, and thinking about Smith & Wesson's place in hip hop while reviewing their new album, I felt like I needed a little bit more context about their journey, lyrically, spiritually, as men, musically, and all of that. Now, spoiler alert, my opinion doesn't change about the album, but my opinion really wasn't negative. I think it's a good album, right? But there was a part of me that was so attached to The Shining, their debut album, that it was making it difficult for me to even prepare to listen to a new album. Well, I've already gone through all of their albums. It's about 7 of them. And I have an episode, a tier list, a ranking of Smith & Wesson albums. And if you know, I've done a couple of these over time. Ghostface, Eminem, Snoop, Raekwon, you know what I'm saying? Meth and Redman. Like, these things, doing these tier lists are good for the simple fact that, you really get to get a feel for a catalog instead of really just kind of sort of using your memory, and maybe you only remember like 1 or 2 songs from one album or never heard an album. So stay tuned for that on the channel right here. Subscribe for more. It should be good. And just for those who don't know, I like to make the category something related to the artist. So I'm going to just give you a hint, big Brooklyn style. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be Brooklyn style. I might put a hat on. As a matter of fact, I will put a hat on. Okay. But stay tuned for that. That will be exclusive to YouTube, because I think the visual plays more into the podcast episode. And I'm not sure if it would be, I don't know. If you listen on audio and you prefer, let me know. I can release it as an audio podcast, but I think visually, you receive it better because you get to see the categories, get to see the album covers, you get to see me like a little bit on the screen. But we'll see. But right now, exclusive to YouTube. So If you're listening in audio form, the link to the YouTube channel is always in the description of the episode you're listening to. So you can always get there and, oh, let me check it out. Oh, that's what he looked like. Stuff like that. All right. Big shout out to hiphopdx.com, Double XL Mag, and a couple of places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business. You have never heard of this cat. I'm not gonna hold you, you know. But he comes from Terror Squad. Those who know, Terror Squad, what's that? Just go back a decade or so, if not a little bit more. But Cuban Linx, saying part of the Terror Squad, recently accused Cameron of stealing a song. Let's check out what's here. Uh, so this was on Cuban Linx YouTube show where he basically talked about how he said Cam and Mase stole Cameron's I guess that was his debut single, Horse and Carriage. It was a big single for him on his debut album, and Cuban Link accused them of stealing that. So let's see what exactly was said. Okay, real quick. That was supposed to be my single. The next thing I see is F and Horse and Carriage with Mase and Cam and F and Pun, which use the same reference as the hook, which originates from Desi Arnaz and his Orchestra 1948 song Cuban Cabbie. Let's see, we might have missed something here. In a recent episode, this is coming from hiphopdx.com. In a recent episode of his YouTube show, the Cuban born rapper explained that he once put together a song. Oh, that's what I see. That was a Eddie Murphy routine in the presence of Mase and sang him the hook. Haha, that's where it happens. So the story here is that we wondered what Cam and Mase would have to say, and Cameron says this. He basically said, let me find the quote real quick. My bad, y'all. He actually addressed it on his YouTube series Talk with Flea and says, neither he nor Mase directly stole the song, but Cuban Link may have a case. I have no idea what Cuban Link is talking about as far as Mase overhearing his hook and Mase stealing the hook. This is what I will tell Cuban Link though. If you sang your hook in front of Lance Rivera, then you may have a case because came up with that hook. Rivera is the one who came up saying he wanted to sing the Ricky Ricardo hook. If you ever sang that hook in front of Lance, you may have an argument, but Mase didn't come up with that hook. Interesting. Now, for those who don't know, Rivera, Lance Rivera, is the guy who signed Cameron along with Biggie. It was Biggie's business partner. It was big. It was what Biggie was working on, was a side deal with to release artists, and Cameron was one of those first artists. Um, Now we know that was stabbed apparently back in the day, um, allegedly because he was bootlegging Jay-Z's album. I think it was the third Sean Carter's joint, supposedly. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason why we can go ahead and say did it. And I think passed away. Uh, I don't know. Confirm that in the comments. But I'll tell you this much. In the record industry, yeah, it's par for the course. It happens. Not that everybody's that way, because obviously not. But they're stealing is not something that is foreign to the record industry. People done stole beats, rhymes, flows, hooks, and things like that. And a lot of times, like if you think of somebody like Cuban Link, cats are so eager to create something dope and they're just in this creative space to share that they don't think about this part of it. They don't think about the fact that you're working on that, but this guy could put that out quicker with these artists. And if Cam is saying Un came up with that hook, I believe him, right? Doesn't matter if Mace was there, you know. He might have now Mace might have been like, ain't that the same hook that Cuban Linx said? But again, the way the record industry works, you never know, right? Like, not saying that this happened or could have happened or whatever, but it's a possibility that people can offer people money, and they're not gonna offer you publishing, right? They're gonna offer you money first for certain things and ideas or credits or whatever. But Cuban Link didn't know, so obviously that didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? And apparently Cam and Mace didn't know either. It was a big hit for Cam as far as the beginning of his career. But it's not, and I'm not saying that Cuban Link said this, but I'm just saying in general, it's not responsible for his success. A lot of times people think, if one thing was taken from another person, then they just took off. Nah, you got to be able to duplicate that and do more than just that. So whereas Horse and Carriage, especially for us hip hop heads at the time, was something a kind of style we wasn't used to hearing from Cam. Mace we were, but Cam, as far as the beat and that kind of hook or whatever, they made it what it was. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not just the beat, it's not just the hook. Cam and Mace, or let's just say Cam in particular, did his job with the lyrics. So it's messed up if things definitely went down that way. And if you think about it, it's just sort of like ideas like that. You got to hop on them, get them out, and take off with them because somebody else will run with it. It's sort of like the whole uh Drake and the song. What was the name of the song? Not 0 to 100. Yeah, 0 to 100. Where that was, that beat and Drake's feature was supposed to be for a Diddy album. When it didn't happen, Drake just put the joint out, and Diddy knew. Can't really do nothing with it now unless you want to do a remix with him. Can't do nothing with it now. That song belongs to Drake. He put it out. It's eternally attached to him. So it is what it is. No pun intended. No pun intended. Damn, see, big pun. Cuban Link, just what? Whatever. 50 Cent recently celebrated uh 20 years of his sophomore album, The Massacre. And there's a lot of conversation around this album, and I'll just let you know my thoughts. The anticipation for a follow up to Get Rich or Die Trying was crazy. You know why? Because Get Rich or Die Trying was huge for 50 Cent. So when The Massacre was releasing, I should have known by the album cover. Because when I saw the album cover, I was like, damn, this is kind of like the same thing over, but instead they like drew muscles on them. Like, this is kind of weird for a follow up, but whatever. Who knows what it's going to sound like? And then when I finally heard the album, I was highly disappointed because on Get Rich or Die Trying, there might not be any skips. If so, maybe one. You know, I know for me the PIMP joint can kind of get a little stale for me. But it still is a joint that you can let rock sometimes. And this album in particular, the Massacre, was retreading a lot of familiar ground as far as the themes and the club hits. And like when I heard Candy Shop, I was like, man, this is so whack to me. Like, and it was whack to me because it was clearly because Eminem was doing the same thing around this time. It was clearly like going back to the well to try to give you that same feeling you had in the club, but in the club was different. Candy Shop was just sort of like, we're gonna try to get the same hits in. And there were too many of those that didn't hit that took away from the songs that did, right? Like what's the joint like Baltimore Love Thing? I think that was the name of the track. Like that track was crazy. Hold on, here we go. Like I like In My Hood, right? Piggy Bank was a diss song, so you know that's always fun. And what's the other joint? Ski Mask Way was dope. A Baltimore Love Thing was the record I was talking about. And when you listen to this album, it's a lot of hit or miss, right? Like every time you get to a record that you like, you get a song like Gatman and Robin featuring Eminem. I thought that was whack, right? Or Candy Shop, records like that, or Disco Inferno. Like, why is this here? You know what I'm saying? And when you think about it, right? 50 telling a story. The album could have been something totally different. It could have been a great follow-up because he basically gave a lot of records to other artists that could have appeared on this particular album, right? Like if you look at some of the like, yeah, okay, maybe the Eminem joint could stay, but like Candy Shop and Disco Inferno, if you replace that with Magic Stick or Little Kim and just one of the joints he did with Game, this is a different album. Let alone the other record that he had with Game, because I'm forgetting the name, Hate It or Love It, and I forget the other one. But those two records were huge for the Game. But if they were on the Massacre, forget about it. It just would have been like, yo, this album is crazy. It's a great follow up. So there are a lot of people who feel like I feel, but then there's a bunch of people who love this album. And they say, yeah, Candy Shop was kind of blah, 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 but you know, I really mess with what's here. And I think it just comes down to are the stronger cuts on this album strong enough to make you want to listen to the entire album and maybe skip the joints you don't like. For me, it was sort of like it was just too many to me that were like really bad. That just makes me feel like I just wish they were gone from the album. Now, we live in a streaming society where, you know, if you own the album, well, you can take the wax songs off and just rock with what's good. But that's not how it was released. So, what do y'all feel about it? When 50 Cent dropped his my bad. dropped his sophomore album, The Massacre, were you hyped? Anticipating it? Were you satisfied when you got the album? Did you feel like I feel that there was a lot of whack joints on there? Leave your comments in the comment section below. I do read them and I do respond. And last, there's been a lot of talk about the blog era hip hop. So much talk. Shout out to Tony from Into the Dome podcast. We do a podcast that appears right here on this feed called That Time in Hip Hop. And one of our recent episodes was about the blog era because it seems like people are getting nostalgic for it, so nostalgic for it that J. Cole has a blog again and releases music on it, in particular the joint Clouds. Now, yes, it's on streaming services, but it's more about the delivery. Wiz Khalifa wound up doing a remix of that. And there's all kinds of other things going on real quick. Let me just go to Hip Hop DX where they say blog era back with a question mark. How J. Cole, Wiz Khalifa, and others are restoring the feeling. So let's see. In recent months, a number of hip hop stars from J. Cole and Wiz Khalifa to Big Sean and Chance the Rapper have quietly been helping to recapture the essence of one of the game's best loved periods, the blog era. Beginning in the mid 2000s, this digital revolution redefined hip hop and breathed new life into the genre as internet piracy was crippling the music industry at large. Pioneering websites like Nah Right. Oh, I forgot about Nah Right. Two Dope Boys and On Smash wrestled power away from traditional gatekeepers such as radio stations, record labels, and magazines, spearheading a new wave of online tastemakers that shook up the game. So I'm not going to get too deep into this because it really kind of goes over the blog era. And I kind of wanted to see what they were going to say about what's happening now. I mean, you can check out the article on hiphopdx.com about this, but they essentially talk about what I just said. When you think about those names, J. Cole, Chance the Rapper, Wiz Khalifa, Big Sean, they were pivotal in the blog era, right? Like they got their name up, they put out some classic material, debatably better than what their major releases are. Depends on what you like and what you don't, including also, well, contributors that also were included were like Lil Wayne and others, right? And it was a dope time, but what I feel now is no, you can't really restore the feeling of that era. You can be nostalgic for it with a song here and there, but it will never be what it was because of what they mentioned, right? That was a specific point in time where that's where hip hop was. That's where the music was. That was the business. That's what you should do, right? At the time. Blog about it, post, release music there, talk about it, like this really free way of doing things. But we know the blog era ended because it became more about record labels doing some of those things, right? And the lines blurred between mixtapes and albums. And now you couldn't just go and download the latest J. Cole or whoever. I mean, J. Cole joints never really came with a price tag, but in general, it was just like you either buying it on datpiff.com or you gonna buy it from iTunes, you know. And that's it's just kind of ended with the piracy, with everything else. Like streaming services ended the blog era in a lot of ways, and record labels did also, when it came to access. Like, for example, it was just like no more reason to check two dope boys to see what was new when you can just open up your phone, like if you have an iPhone, and you go to Apple Music and they have a whole section of new releases in hip hop, and the things that you would have got exclusively on a mixtape are now right there on the streaming service. So there was just no reason to visit these sites anymore. Um, I do like the idea of restoring the feeling because, truth be told, look at the artists they named and where they are now, right? Everybody's not whack, but they're so far removed from the time when it was the blog era that it's nice to see them go back a little bit. It's kind of like when people who are Nas fans wanted Illmatic 2 forever, right? And Nas just wasn't going to comply. He may give you a song or two here and there that kind of restores that feeling, but I feel like it wasn't until the album with him and Hit Boy Magic that I really felt like, oh, this kind of sounds like old Nas. Like his old flow is in there a little bit, and the beats and the cover art was old Nas. It was Illmatic Nas on the cover, right? Not the album cover of Illmatic, but a photo from that time when he made Illmatic and it was released. And that joint was like in the source or whatever, that picture. So that kind of restored the feelings. That's why, like, there's some cats who wanted Nas to do that for decades, and they look at this Hit Boy run. That's usually the favorite because that's the closest you get to Illmatic Esco Nas, right? Without going back and listening to Illmatic or It Was Written and stuff like that. So I don't mind them restoring the feeling from a blog era standpoint. I think out of the four named, Chance the Rapper is probably the one who should really embrace it more because apparently, even though I liked his second album, apparently there's a lot of fans who weren't feeling it, and he hasn't dropped in a while. He's dropped singles here and there. He can use a refresh, a reset, in order to remind people of his contributions to the mixtape game during the blog era. So there you have it. Are you nostalgic for the blog era? Is this what you want from J. Cole? Go read blogs and get a little snippet of a song. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Once again, subscribe to the podcast if you love what you're watching, if what you're hearing. Hit that like button. Those count too. Comment, engagement counts as well. If you have something to say, we read it, we respond. But most importantly, share it with people would enjoy this kind of content. Follow me on social media at Vegas World INC. And until next time, I'm not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.